Welcome everybody to the Package Group Weekly Sync for the 2nd of March 2020. I'm pretty confident I have the date right this time. Triple checking. Yes, date is correct. I guess I'll kick off with an item here. Is a CI/CD strategy conversation. I linked to this document. Pretty much worth reading through. This will make an appearance in our handbook pages for strategy, I believe. Tim, do you want to let people know who are not like in GitLab who may be watching this where they could find this at some point?
Yeah, I wonder, is that shared for external folks or is that an internal only presentation?
Well, I think it will be internal only, but I think the results of the conversation will end up probably on the strategy page. Wouldn't that be where it'd be?
Right. Yeah, exactly. So basically Jason reviewed with the e-group last week, the CI/CD strategy and direction pages, and got some feedback, and they took some notes, and there was some action items that mostly for verify and release to take, but some good feedback about our stage as well. So I just wanted to post here so everyone had a chance to view it. And I thought it was really helpful to hear how Sid and Mark and Scott and Eric are talking about, and John Jeremiah are talking about CI/CD and how they're pushing us to move in a specific direction. So
cool. Yeah, and I definitely thought it was worth reading through / watching the video if you're interested. But again, this is a sort of internal conversations that will appear in public for people who are following along at home. So cool. Moving on from that, if no one has any comments or questions. Cool. Jerome updated the definition of done with a couple of MRs. One around secure coding guidelines, and the other around storage considerations for performance. This is something we should all take a look at. Definition of done, something we need to be paying attention to. And for people at home, the definition of done is a handbook of something you can have a look at. And this would be applicable to community contributors, so worth taking a look at. Thoughts, questions? Nope. And over to Nick.
Yeah, so I noticed last week that the code review survey insights was posted, and the big sort of headline, at least for package, is that it seems that we have quite, or the majority negative sentiment towards the code review process. So I just thought perhaps we should talk about that and figure out why it's negative and what, if any, action we should be taking as a team to address that negativity and like move forward. So when I originally added this to the agenda, Steve hadn't posted his insights and his comments there. So I just left this point in case people wanted to know my feedback and why it could have been taken as negative. So I can go into detail on what I left. And so when the survey came out, I had in that last couple of weeks a few reviews that I felt were really opinionated, in the sense that things weren't being merged because I didn't reach somebody's opinion on what a feature should look like or what it should be. And I've got a couple of instances of this, and that really annoyed me. I'm going to be honest. It annoyed me because it blocks my progress in getting something merged, and there was no clear guidelines in the documentation that says feature X needs to be implemented in code style Y. Like, it just wasn't black and white. And so it was fairly opinionated as to what was being blocking. Now, in my head, I'm a pretty lenient guy in the sense that if the code is readable and it isn't a mess, then I don't feel that I should be getting involved and making changes, especially seeing or enforcing my opinion, especially outside of like package. So if I was to review somebody else's code and they might have a different style to me, then I wouldn't necessarily comment on that or like block a review on that just because like it doesn't match my opinion. And I felt that at the time of the survey, I'd had a few MRs where this was the case. And I wonder, like, part of me wonders when I think about this in the broader sense, and especially my own experiences as well. So I'm training to become a maintainer, and the types of reviews that I'm getting, or a lot of the MRs that I'm getting, are pretty simple in the sense that there isn't much to suggest. But I mean, I'm never going to become a maintainer unless I'm like providing feedback and can demonstrate that my knowledge is good enough to be that worthy of that of maintainers, you know. So I feel that in certain respects, the review process really does encourage this kind of opinion-based nitpicking of code, because if you're looking at reviews and there's not really much you can say, you're never ever going to become a maintainer. You know, it's in your interest as a trainee maintainer to find something wrong with a review to demonstrate your knowledge. And if there isn't anything obvious for this, then it can be quite hard to prove this. And this is like, at least in my experience, is that I'm not getting a lot of reviews per week. I'm perhaps getting 2 or 3. And this was before me and Nico were handing reviews, like MRs, back and forth. At which point we did sort of accelerate how many reviews we were doing in a week's time. So a lot of my feedback was based on that, essentially. I will pass it over to Steve to voice his feedback as well.
Sure. And actually kind of echoing on that a little bit, I would tend to agree that I have experienced a lot of sort of, code opinions that aren't really documented in the developer docs of like, oh, we should format a test in a certain way, or we should, like little cosmetic sort of things. And I would agree that if we are going to have some sort of a, like, everyone is going to follow these rules, it should be enforced by a linter or written down in the docs somewhere, probably. Because that would be a more reasonable way to say like, oh, this is how we do things. So that might be something worth looking into. On my side, I was thinking more, not necessarily with the nitpicking, but with whether or not we should be using roulette. And I have very mixed opinions. I've discussed them with a few of you. And so just to recap what I wrote here really is that doing reviews within our team helps spread knowledge within our team, but it does take away from the rest of GitLab. So, it's nice that we share our reviews with each other, but like you said, you don't get many reviews as a trainee maintainer. And some of that might be because you come up as the reviewer, but then someone chooses their own teammate instead. So it's kind of this double-edged sword of like, are we being selfish by doing our own reviews, or being helpful to our own team for sharing our knowledge? And so I was thinking that if an MR is big or complex enough to warrant sort of that domain expertise or the need to want to share some knowledge, perhaps instead of just having the first review be one of our own group members, we would have a separate review, dare I say third review, extra review, where the package member isn't reviewing the quality of code or anything like that, but purely just reviewing the approach and verifying that the solution makes sense. So really just a domain review. And so I think that would still benefit our team in spreading knowledge, but it shouldn't really take much time or block the MR, especially since that's the kind of thing that can happen while the MR is still being worked on. And then in doing that additional sort of review, it still allows us to use the roulette for, benefiting all of the rest of the people that show up in our trainee maintainers. I do have a tiny MR there to discuss that idea, but those are kind of my thoughts on the overall roulette and review process.
So I added a point after Steve, unless Ailey wants to verbalize her comment on Steve.
Yeah, I'll go ahead. Is this something that could probably done with like a code owner file and approval, just so that you have to, somebody's identified as a domain expert here, and that you have to get their approval of the MR, and that could be like the overall direction of the MR, rather than them actually doing a review and looking, at a fine detail sort of thing.
I think that's a good idea. I think like there's some gray area of, you know, at what point do you say it's necessary to have a code owner review? Like just because I'm working on something in package, if it's like a simple change, it's kind of like a, well, nobody really needs to look at this. But if I'm implementing a new package manager, certainly I want people on the team to be looking at it. So I like that idea though, having like a list somewhere that we can use.
Okay. So I was looking at the full survey, not just the part regarding package. And for note taking, I will add this later in the document as well. I think we need to take in consideration two things. The survey is not being done by the full company, at least definitely not from all the individual contributor. And second, there is another piece of data that I think is really relevant, is the fact that the most of people that have a problem with the review process is people that are between 3 months to 1 year in the company. And this, first of all, align with the fact that our stage has a bad opinion, because that's basically the full of our team, right? if not, that is close. And the second thing, I think this suggests that people are get used to this kind of review process, right? And getting used, it can be either positive or negative, in my opinion. It can be that you just found a way around the flow of the system, and now you're comfortable because that's how you're going. It's like having a shoe with your shoelaces are too short and you need to make a very small knot. After doing it for 1 year, now you're really fast, you don't mind anymore. And this can be a problem, because if we want to scale, and this is going to be a problem that the new engineer will keep having, a new team will keep having, or maybe not, or maybe it's just that the process is complex because the problem is complex, and this is just normal. So just wanted to add these thoughts around this data.
Haley, do you want to verbalize that?
Yeah, I was just thinking that that sort of pattern of people who've been at the company longer, who are not rating the review process as low, is perhaps that there's some survivorship bias. Like if it's so these people might, if they really had a problem with the review system, they might have moved on. They might have been generally unhappy with the company and moved on. So somebody who's been here for longer is probably going to be in a group that doesn't mind the process as much, more than someone else potentially. It's hard to say, but I think that's a potential effect.
Yeah. Okay. So I think probably worthwhile having more of an in-depth discussion about this. I'm going to create an issue in the team page so we can sit down and try and do an RCA on this and what the causes are. I feel like this is a really worthwhile discussion, and I feel like I want to have Gigi's input in this as well. And you know, I think it's worthwhile getting this down and trying to work it out, treating it like an RCA. And I realize that some of these things are going to be somewhat subjective. I think there's a totally subjective nature to this. Just to you know, be real clear about one thing, I was encouraging actively people to hand reviews to each other in order to sort of triage the feeling that this was just people's reviews were taking weeks, which was just unacceptable. I think at the point we all sort of start getting a handle on what we're trying to do, then those sort of concerns that Nick, you originally raised around what feels like really nitpicky or opinionated sort of approaches that needs to be then you know, sort of adhered to before you get something merged. To me, what I hear there is, you know, an example of something where it's like, no, but this is not a problem with the code, whereas this in the handbook, that type of response. And if not, I'm going to submit it. You can create an issue to correct or something like that. Like it's, I don't want people to be gated around that unless it's actually a significant problem. But these are sort of things that I think should be rolled up into the handbook to sort of say, in an opinion-based scenario, there shouldn't be like a gatekeeper there saying, although that's the intention of the maintainer, right? They are a gatekeeper. That's the kind of role. I think that we had been talking about the idea of sort of saying what the expectations or what could be considered non-subjective or non-opinionated reasons to hold up a code review or maintain a code review, sort of documenting that to be clear on what those things were. But I think there's a lot of different variables, but I'll go and create an issue so that we can all talk about it. And we can hopefully take it there a little bit. And if necessary, we can have a separate conversation about this if we think that that's going to be helpful. Do people feel like that's an okay action item out of this? I don't want to seem like I'm dismissing anyone's concerns at all, because I'm certainly not. I think this is one of the things I've been focused on solving as well. Is that okay with everybody? Thumbs up, thumbs down. Cool, thank you. I just realized we're sort of coming up to time, and I wanted to make sure we were taking something away from this. Does anyone else on the call want to say anything about the review process or feel like something should be added here, since this might be the only chance for some people to hear this conversation if they happen upon the package group meeting on YouTube, or they're actually reading through the notes or something?
Yeah, so one of the things that I remember reading in the handbook about these sort of this kind of thing where it's like, I have a problem that's kind of stylistic, that's not necessarily an official GitLab style, is to do like nitpick or non-blocking. I think it's specifically like non-blocking in front of like your comment, just to say like, this is my preference. Like I prefer the braces on the next line, but we don't have anything to point to that requires that. And I'll do that sometimes just to be like, you don't have to address this if you don't want to, but I have to say something because I'm an engineer. So maybe encouraging people to do that, because it is in the handbook, or it was at the time that I read it.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense to me, but I think it still relies on the person making that comment to recognize themselves that their comment is like, oh, take it or leave it, right? So that might be nice if we could sort of build those habits for people to sort of say, to front load that comment with, hey, optional or subjective or, opinion or whatever it is that they front load it with. And then you can sort of start that as a sort of a process for people to follow, and that will become habit at some point. But you still have, you still potentially have that scenario where people are like, no, this is legit. And you're like, but no, it's not, right? And so then how do you sort of work that conflict out? And that sounds more like what Nick was sort of communicating at the start, right? Of like someone going, no, you have to do this. And it's like, really? And like, yes, my opinion is important. And I'm not even talking about anyone in particular, obviously, but that was how I heard it characterized. I shouldn't be making jokes. I apologize. Cool. Thank you for sharing that, David.
I have a question. Is there a way to extract data around this instead of conducting a survey? I mean, everything is in our GitLab.com database, right? So we already have data about like mean time to merge, but maybe we could extract like who is the real reviewer of every MR, like the same department, same stage or age of experience, and like look at the data instead of feelings as well.
I mean, that's a great question, Nico. I don't have an answer for that. I'll add it into the CI/CD staff meeting, and maybe even ask Darby about it if we can get access to the sort of data at that level. But I don't have an answer to that. I'm sorry. If I'm honest, I didn't even know we were getting this. This is the first time seeing this. I was like, oh, really? And I probably just missed it somewhere because I was distracted on Friday or whenever we were doing it, but that's on me. So I apologize that I'm not as read up on this as maybe I could be. So I'll follow up with the idea of getting more data. I think in this context, I will have action items coming out of this whole survey anyway. And so this will be certainly one of them. We're a bit of an outlier there, as everyone rightly identified. So cool. All right, I'm going to go create the issue. I'll follow up. I'll add an item into the staff meeting so that we can have a talk about more data, and I'll mention it to Darby as well. So And just as a reminder, everyone can attend that staff meeting. The videos aren't uploaded anywhere, but they go into the Google Drive as normal. So you could all see that staff meeting. It's not like private, secret, pointy head boss business. You could always attend if you wanted to. Cool. Next topic.
Yes, that's me. So the Waves performance training started last week, and so all the sessions are recorded, and memory team created an issue listing all the resources, all the sessions, recordings, and all the materials that we use, articles and such. So have a look, they are quite interesting.
Cool. Thanks for sharing that, David. That's awesome. Appreciate it. All right. I think that's all we have on the agenda right now. So if everyone can hang around, we do have a not recorded item that we need to discuss. Apologies for the people trying to follow along at home. We do have some things that are not public, and that's explained in the handbook. So please hang around after this, and I'm going to stop the recording. But thank you very much for everyone. Hope everyone enjoys the rest of the day, whatever that looks like, and we'll see you next time. Bye.